whenever you're ready.
Dr. Davis, could you please tell us who you are and what you do?
Sure, I'm Dr. Davis. I'm assistant professor in the Department of Fine Arts and Communication Studies. Specifically, I'm a professor of communication studies. I teach public speaking, interpersonal communication, research methods, intercultural communication, and senior seminar.
What first got you interested in the Step Up program?
I think the nature of the classroom is changing, and it has to. Right? We can't teach the same way in all things the way that we taught 100 years ago. Our lives have changed from 100 years ago. It can't just be me standing at the front of a room lecturing. I don't find that engaging. I don't think most of my students find that engaging. And we all use new technologies. I have an iPhone, right? I use it to get directions. I use it to check where the nearest pizza place is, or if my favorite pizza place is already closed. My students used it in class when they weren't supposed to, in ways that were frustrating for me. And I was looking forward to the opportunity to harness those tools and the way in which students, and I would say people at large, learn now in our current era and the current use of technology in everyday life. So when the QEP ended up being preparing students for a future with technology, I was really excited about the opportunity to kind of get in on the ground floor of that. Because while I had my iPhone and I have my Mac and what have you, I'm not particularly tech savvy, right? I didn't, sign up because I was like, I am the ultimate tech professor and I will crush this. I didn't know that much about it. I wanted to know more and I wanted to be more comfortable with it. And that's largely why I signed up.
So it was a learning experience for you as well.
A huge learning experience. And in fact, in the application for the QEP cohort, I said that. And it was like, tell us why you'd be a good fit. And I'm like, because I want to learn. I'm like, I don't already know this stuff. If you want people who already know this stuff, I am not your professor. But if you're willing to teach me this stuff, I'd be really excited about the opportunity. And that's what they seem to be looking for. They didn't expect you already to know it. They wanted you to be interested in knowing it.
Right. Okay. So how have you been changing your teaching as a result of joining Step Up?
The gen ed class that I teach is public speaking, and so that's my official QEP class. Mm-hmm. So what used to be an informative speech, an introductory speech, an informative speech, and a persuasive speech has now become a digital story, a podcast, and a persuasive speech. I've really taken those first two major assignments and just changed the requirements altogether. They're very different projects now. It's still important, I think, for public presentation, right? My students get lots of practice in the front of the room and what have you, but also they use tools that a lot of them will be using in their workplaces at some point, right? We need to know how to give presentations, and we need to know how to give them differently, and we need to know how to get that information out there to a larger audience, right? YouTube videos, podcasts, what have you. And so I have my students working on those as well. But I didn't limit it just to that. I've taken pieces of it to my upper division courses, so particularly my gender comm class, I taught that in the spring, and I encouraged and in fact required my students to create Twitter accounts for that class. And we had a class hashtag. And so both on their own and sometimes based as assignments, I asked students to share moments of what was happening relating to gender comm in the classroom, or stories, like news stories that they'd heard and how those things relate. And it was really, really interesting because they really engaged it. They were talking to each other on Twitter. They were talking to me. We ended up spending the first 15 minutes of lots of class periods talking about the things that people had posted from Twitter since the last class. And it was really, really helpful in getting them to see the way in which the subject matter, gender comm, really exists in their everyday experience. That it wasn't just like this thing that you're studying in this class twice a week, but that it is your everyday life. And that was really nice.
Okay. What have you found most rewarding about how your teaching has changed?
Most rewarding is the students seem more comfortable using the technology, which is funny, right? Because we assume that students are just tech literate, right? Like, I want to know how to fix my phone. I give it to my 7-year-old nephew and, he'll fix it for me. And while sometimes, that sort of mentality is accurate, it turns out students actually don't know a lot about how to use these programs effectively for their future careers. And I really like how students seem to be more comfortable after they leave my class or later in the semester in my class with these technologies and ways they can use them professionally than they were when they first showed up. And I like that I have learned how to use them professionally, or sometimes just learn to use them at all, compared to when I initially started.
So what was most challenging?
Learning how to use the technology. In part. a bigger thing that I've gotten a lot more comfortable with, and this was my problem even in the workshop, the QEP week-long workshop, is letting failures happen, right? When you're getting involved with tech, like sometimes stuff is going to just go wrong. And owning up to that with my public speaking students, particularly that first semester of the QEP, was hard for me, right? I had to have the talk that said, like, sometimes this is just not going to work and it's going to be awkward, right? And so like the first day that students were supposed to be doing their digital stories, it turns out like a lot of students didn't finalize their digital story and there was like one more step. And so they were trying to open these giant documents and it was just a mess. Like we ended up doing none of them and it was supposed to be presentation day. And I was embarrassed, I should know better, right? It was the first time I had done it. We all learned together, right? We scrapped it. We found the problem. I told them all how to fix the problem. The next class was fine. And so the biggest challenge ended up being okay with ambiguity or even failure, depending on the day. But recognizing that's part of learning. And while I say that to my students, it's hard for, maybe a faculty member such as myself, but learning to be okay with it, I think, was perhaps the most challenging.
How have your students reacted to a more technology-intensive course?
It depends on the semester. So I've been doing this for a few semesters now. Some semesters, I think it works better with a smaller class. Let me start with that. Because I've done the tech intensive with a full public speaking section, which is 20. And I taught an 8 a.m. public speaking section, so I only had about 10. That one worked a lot better. And I think it was because we had so much more time to troubleshoot. The final products were more polished. They were more confident because we had time in class. They had time to meet with me one-on-one, twice as much time, arguably, right? And so I would say largely they've reacted positively, but certainly not all. And definitely I had more buy-in in my smaller section than I did in my bigger sections.
What are the most significant effects you've seen resulting from teaching and learning with digital information and communication technology?
That is a long-winded question. I would say, I don't know that we know the effect yet, right? I think we're kind of in its infancy. We're at the starting line. I'll tell you what I'm hopeful that the effects will be, and that's more that students will be fluent in using these tools and therefore able to gain fluency in other tools that we don't yet have, right? We know how fast technology moves. Like, Facebook only existed, 8 years ago now, and, Twitter even a few years fewer than that. Different types of podcasting software, Audacity and what have you. It moves fast. And so I think that the goal is to have a society where we are able to use the tools when we need to use the tools and are able to learn the tools as needed, right? We don't need technology in every moment of our lives. I don't think that the goal of this project is or should be every assignment in every class should involve technology. I think that is not the point. And in fact, if that is the point, it's problematic. I think instead what the point is to get students who can be fluent to know when they're supposed to use this and when they are supposed to use it to be able to use it well, whatever the it in this case is, right? Whatever those digital fluencies might be.
Can you share a specific story that demonstrates some of the effects? You shared so much, so.
I'm trying to think. I'm sure that I do. I'm just. I did have a student who I had in that small class that I mentioned come back and say that she was using podcasting in an alternate assignment for another course. So the instructor for this other course was like, here's your final project, but it can be anything, right? It doesn't have to be a paper. It doesn't have to be a project. What is it? And she chose to develop this podcast and do interviews on the subject at hand and talk to people and then kind of compiled this and polished it a bit and made a really nice podcast out of it. And I thought that was great, like that she had kind of internalized that idea of like, it doesn't all have to be one thing and we can try different things depending on what the parameters for our work is.
I know you touched on this subject already, but how do you keep up with the advancements in technology?
Not very well is my best guess. I keep up through, in part, the QEP. We have meetings, right, with folks who are also in this cohort, and someone says, like, oh, hey, I tried this new thing, and we all, like, scribble it down and say, oh, that might be useful, or that's probably not going to be so useful for me. Through reading blogs, my professional organization I go to conferences during the year, and I'm going to one in a couple of weeks, and I'm taking 2 short courses, which are like day-long courses, and one is using apps in the classroom, and one is teaching with technology. So I go to these and I learn a lot there of like, hey, here are some ideas for either technologies you use and you haven't thought to use in this way, or technologies you might not have heard of yet, but you might want to look into. And those have both been really useful for me. So I think between professional development and kind of what you stumble upon kind of on your own, those are how I've made those leaps.
Okay. Since the Bring Your Own Device initiative started, have you noticed a difference in the number of devices used by students in your classroom?
Yes, because I asked them to use them. So before the BYOD initiative, I tried to get students not to use them unless we really needed them for something, because I think a lot of the time they were being misused. But I've really tried to encourage students to use their devices in the classroom for the projects we're working on, right? I'm still not afraid to shame people if it turns out, I bust them on Facebook or texting. But yes, I feel like my students are able to do a lot more research in class. And then, so like when we're doing impromptu speeches or what have you, they're just not the same anymore. I can give them, I'm like, you have 5 minutes, like go. And they're able to really put together something really interesting that's much more involved than they were able to do before. And I like it because when I do those things now, I know that just about every student has a device. I don't worry quite as much. Like I want to make sure that nobody is in a position where they're like, well, like I don't have a device. And so I check that at the beginning of the semester, and I have a couple of spare devices. So I have them available. So if I have a student who for some reason doesn't or can't have a device of their own, I can share my own with them if I know it's going to be a day that we're doing that kind of work.
In your opinion, how useful is the Bring Your Own Device initiative for students?
I think it will be useful. I think this first year, much like anything, is the entry point, and so I think whenever you start something, it's a little rough. So some people have them all the time, and some people don't have them all the time, and some people don't know how to use the device that they have necessarily particularly effectively. Sometimes in HPAC, Wi-Fi is wonky, right? And so when I say, hey, everybody, go to whatever, and they're like, I can't log in. Okay, well, this is part of the learning curve for all of us, right? For us in IT and getting everything squared away. So I think it will be. So far, I don't know. This is my most honest response for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you think that's the only disadvantage that you see as far as the...
What do you mean? What is the only disadvantage?
Is that the only disadvantage as far as people not having it or the Wi-Fi not working?
Those are the 2 things that I've run into most, is, the actual tech problems with the tech, or not having a device or not having it with them. Yeah.
So looking ahead 5 years, how do you see Step Up and the Bring Your Own Device initiative affecting the way we experience teaching and learning?
It's another I don't know, obviously, but a couple of my best guesses will be, I think that you're going to see it in more classes, right? So I think that the Gen Ed tech intensive classes will have expanded. So I think it's going to be much more normalized that everyone's going to have a tablet in class or similar, whatever, laptop, whatever that might be, and that it's going to be part and parcel. So it's no longer going to be a strange thing when you see students kind of tapping away, on their iPad or tablet or whatever it might be, versus now when there's still sometimes what's happening there, right? How is that being used, and is it being used effectively? I think we'll have much better ideas within 5 years of how to harness the power of those types of technologies, the hardware, right? And how to best use them in our various subjects. Because I think right now there's a lot of trial and error, and I think there will continue to be. But I think we'll have a better idea then.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about that we didn't ask you about?
Not that I can think of, but I think that this is a really interesting project.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, we thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for asking me to interview me. I appreciate it.
All right.
Bye.